To get to the news that's happening right now, the U.S. government officially shut down at midnight after Congress and the White House failed to reach an agreement on how to extend federal funding. It is the first shutdown since 2018 during President Trump's first term, which was the longest ever at 34 days. Hours before last night's deadline, both Republican and Democratic funding proposals were rejected by the Senate. This despite 3 Democrats voting in favor of the GOP bill. As of this moment, there is still no clear path to a resolution. Republicans say there is nothing left to negotiate and expect Democrats to crack under pressure.
I think there are a lot of them over there who know that their leadership is walking them off the cliff and really want to do something other than follow the leader, but they are under so much pressure from the political left in this country. I think they're stuck, and they don't have an identity right now, and this is just an example that they really don't know what they're doing. We're going to have another vote tomorrow, and they'll probably try and block it again, but I think people are going to start cracking because they're going to realize this is a losing hand.
There literally is nothing to negotiate. They're bringing in extraneous issues that don't have anything to do at all with keeping the government open. And we've said, you do your first job, keep the government open, and then we'll talk about the rest of it. There's nothing to negotiate. There's nothing I can give. He has to do the right thing because real people are going to be hurt.
So we see now Republicans are plunging America into a shutdown, rejecting bipartisan talks, pushing a partisan bill, and risking America's health care, worst of all. A few moments ago, Republicans once again rejected Democrats' proposals to avoid a shutdown, fix health care premiums, and spare Americans the calamity of skyrocketing through the roof health care costs. Republicans blocked it again, once again. So now 2 times, Republicans have failed to get enough votes to avoid a shutdown. They've got to sit down and negotiate with Democrats to come to a bill that both parties can support.
Perez, it seems like most people have been resigned to this shutdown hitting at midnight overnight. It did. We've been seeing this coming for weeks and months. I know you have too. So just to boil this down, what is this fight over? And if you have the Speaker of the House saying there's nothing to negotiate here, where does it go?
Yeah, you have the Speaker so confident in his position, he didn't even bring the House in this week. Think about it, the House of Representatives not here when the government is shut down. It's crazy to me. This issue is about Obamacare, extended Obamacare premiums that were put in place during the pandemic. When Obamacare was set up, there was premium support that was expanded during the pandemic. These premiums are going to expire. And in November 1, you're going to see a bunch of people, millions of Americans are going to get hit with much higher premiums. They may lose their insurance. CBO estimates over the next 10 years, 10 million Americans will lose their insurance. That's where Democrats are fighting about. They're saying this is part of the whole thing where Trump was elected to help bring down cost, and he's doing the exact opposite, and they're trying to seize on that. And Republicans, as you can see by Johnson and Thune, their body language is like, we have the upper hand here. We just want to keep the government open. We can negotiate the Obamacare issue on the side. We're not giving you any guarantees. And they feel like they have the much stronger position here. So it's a change for Republicans. They're always the ones who shut down the government in the past. There was a short shutdown in 2018 that Schumer pushed on DACA, on Dreamers. But this, in the past, since I've been on the Hill full-time 94, this is Republicans. You go back to Newt Gingrich. They were the ones who shut down the government. In this case, Democrats are shutting down the government. So it's a completely different dynamic, and the messaging is harder when you shut down the government. So Republicans are like, open the government and we'll talk. Democrats are like, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. So it's a tough place for them.
Yeah, Perez is right that the Republicans really projecting confidence last night. We're going to talk to Chuck Schumer on this show a short time from now, by the way, and ask him where we go from here. But the President of the United States also sounding confident throughout and also pushing a false message that Democrats are looking to give, quote, Cadillac medical care plans to illegal immigrants here in this country. We'll walk through why that's not true in just a minute. But why do Republicans, why do the president feel so good at this moment?
Well, in part, they feel like the Democrats have been pretty leaderless and rudderless this entire year. We saw the sort of rebellion that happened in the Senate when Leader Schumer had agreed to keep the government open back in the spring. He faced a lot of anger in his own party, and now there's a sense that he needs to be seen fighting to sort of placate them to start. And Republicans feel like, and we'll dive into the fact check in a moment, but they can hit a lot of the same issues that worked for them in 2024, including on immigration, to do it now. The president, look, there were shutdowns in his first term, and he, as Brez noted, largely paid the price. He was held responsible as poll numbers slipped. They do feel like this time could be different, and they also wield this threat of OMB Director Russ Vought, who has been a Project 2025 guy, who has been a long evangelist of trying to slash federal government. He's the one who famously said he wanted bureaucrats to, I'm paraphrasing here, be intimidated when they come to work. He believes in really cutting the government. And there's a sense, as I reported for The Atlantic, that they might use this shutdown as an opportunity to finish what DOGE started, those huge cuts earlier in the year. They feel like normally it's 750,000 federal employees will be furloughed daily for when the shutdown lasts. But normally, and then essential workers have to work, and they'll get back pay. Normally, government opens, funding returns, they get rehired. What the White House is threatening right now is that they won't be rehired, that they'll use this shutdown as a moment to permanently fire them. Now, the president hasn't given his okay on that just yet, but he has been warming to it, including in some rhetoric we heard from him yesterday. So they're using that as another threat to Democrats, saying, look, get a deal done, or these people are going to lose their jobs.
Well, I mean, and of course, if the Republicans decide they're going to completely gut the government and gut services for working Americans, which the impact's going to fall predominantly on working Americans, on middle-class Americans, then, of course, Republicans at the end of the day will just be hurting themselves. But, Mika, we've been talking the past couple of days just about unambiguous lies that the White House has been putting out. Unambiguous. This is not it's not debatable. We don't usually go around saying, oh, so-and-so is talking about, but there have been over the past week a couple of examples in extreme cases, just unambiguous lies. We've talked about the Vice President of the United States saying that most political violence is coming from the left. That's an unambiguous lie. Every statistic shows that the overwhelming amount of political violence comes from the extreme right. Not that we're blaming anybody, which is exactly what Republicans and their talking heads on other news networks and on podcasts do. But that was just a lie. He felt very comfortable lying, just lying. He knew he was lying, and everybody that repeats that lie knows the vice president's lying about that. And now it's happening again. This time, the lie, and the Speaker of the House, Mr. I rule by the Bible, spreading an unambiguous lie. An unambiguous lie going into this government shutdown. They're lying to their own supporters. They're lying to their own constituents. They're lying to their own followers, saying Democrats want to shut down the government because they want to give great health care benefits to illegal immigrants. It's a total lie. So I'm wondering, where in the Bible does Mike Johnson read Jesus saying, you know what, tell the truth except, well, when it might serve you well politically, and then just lie. And why don't you, while you're lying, why don't you spread lies about those who are on the outskirts of society, those who are suffering right now the most? Why don't you lie about the weakest among us, Mikey? I mean, but that's what he's doing. He's spreading the lie. The president's spreading the lie. All the Republicans are lying through their teeth. And any podcaster today that spreads this lie, anybody on other news networks that spreads this lie, knows exactly what they're doing. There is no Democratic plan to give health care, Cadillac benefits to illegal immigrants. It's not even legal.
With the shutdown standoff in full swing, the Trump administration is taking aim at New York, the home of the top two Democrats in Congress. Today, Trump's budget director announced that the White House is freezing roughly $18 billion in New York City infrastructure projects, including what would be the newest link between the city and New Jersey, the Hudson Tunnel. I want to bring in Senator Andy Kim, Democrat of New Jersey. It's good to see you, and I don't have to tell you your state will be directly impacted by this. The Department of Transportation says it's freezing those funds because the shutdown is preventing it from carrying out a DEI review of the project and even specifically names and blames leaders Schumer and Jeffries. What do you think is going on here, Senator?
Yeah, look, this is one of the most absurd things that I've ever heard. It's so clearly an illegal action in terms of just having political retribution back and using taxpayer dollars to be able to fund that. One of my constituents is Secretary Duffy. He knows the importance of this. He and I have talked about the national importance of the Gateway project. It is absolutely reckless for him to do this, and it's going to put a lot of New Jerseyans in a really tough spot. I will say, this is, I think, going to backfire on him, backfire on this administration, because it's going to really just hit home just how much they're willing to inflict pain on Americans just to make a political point.
Is there anything you can or think you should do about it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, we're gathering. I'm talking to the governor. We're going to look at all the tools that we can to be able to, again, take legal action and other actions that we can do to push back on this. Because, again, this is going to backfire. I really think they made a real political mistake in taking this on. It's going to hurt a lot of Americans, a lot of people in my own state. And this is a great way for Donald Trump to just ensure that the Republicans lose the governor's race. I think he really just locked in that loss for the Republicans. And with the candidate Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey saying that Trump can do no wrong, that he can't think of anything that he disagrees with Trump on, I'd like to for him to explain that answer now.
You mentioned it's going to hurt a lot of people, and I think there are a lot of conversations going on around America. More than 5,000 of your constituents tuned into a virtual town hall you hosted yesterday. So what did you hear? What are they telling you about this shutdown? And what are you telling them about Democrats' strategy?
Yeah, look, over it was like 6,000 people joined a town hall that I held yesterday, and I have to tell you, some of the stories I heard from them really hit home what's at stake. To be able to hear from a woman named Lucinda who was talking about how she just won't be able to afford health care if she's not able to receive some support to offset the skyrocketing costs. Over 4.5 million people across this country will lose their health care, over 20 million potentially seeing their costs double. This is a healthcare crisis, and it's happening right now. We have early enrollment. We have open enrollment starting on November 1st. We cannot wait and kick the can down the road like the Republicans have proposed, and that's really hitting home. I talked with another woman who showed and talked about the challenges that she's facing right now. She said, hold the line. Hold the line for families like mine who are struggling right now, and they are just seeing this administration not taking steps to lower costs. In fact, with the tariffs and other actions increasing costs, with the health care cuts they did in their reconciliation bill, as well as the lawlessness that we're seeing left and right with this administration, that is something they want us to stand against.
So the question is how you get that done, how you get to that place where you can say to your constituents, we've delivered this. We did see you. We were watching the floor, and we saw you and a group of about a dozen senators earlier this hour. Can you tell us about the conversations you're having, and do you feel like you're making any progress?
Well, what's important is that we're having these conversations and we're sitting and talking to each other, and being able to have what the American people want us to do, which is to be adults in the room that are engaging and trying to do what we can to solve this problem. What I will say, though, is I have no one to talk to on the other side of Congress. The House of Representatives, because of Speaker Johnson, is not in session. He just gave the House Republicans a week-long vacation. While I have to say that's so offensive that while our troops and our public servants today are not getting paid, but that the members of Congress in the House of Representatives on the Republican side, they're continuing to get a paycheck while they're not showing up to work. I think that's a dereliction of duty. I cannot negotiate with somebody who's not here. They're not only not in the room, they're just not in the building. They're not even in town. They're not doing their jobs.
So let me just ask you really quickly. Most federal workers will not get a paycheck. You've said you won't take a paycheck. You're having yours withheld. Why is that important to you? Well,
it's important to me because I was a federal civil servant before. You know, I was a GS-scale government employee. I worked my way up from the photocopy room at the State Department. I know what it's like to try to serve this country, and I also know the sacrifices that people make to be able to do that. I had to work through 2 government shutdowns, showed up to work every day without getting a paycheck. It's hard. And I wanted to show solidarity, especially, as I said, I think it is offensive that the President of the United States and members of Congress get paid even though nobody else does. How is that leadership? How is that leading from behind? It makes it seem like we're playing with other people's chips, and the American people hate that. They're disgusted by it, as am I.
Senator Andy Kim, I know you are busy, and I thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Hours into the government shutting down and the impacts already being felt across federal agencies nationwide. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates roughly 750,000 federal workers will be furloughed until lawmakers in Washington can come to an agreement on how to keep the government funded. And as tensions escalate on Capitol Hill, President Trump is threatening he could fire many of the furloughed workers, signaling he may slash federal programs he doesn't like.
A lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things, but they want open borders. They want men playing in women's sports. They want transgender for everybody. They never stop, and they don't learn. We won an election in a landslide. They just don't learn. So we have no choice. I have to do that for the country.
The shutdown standoff in Washington is now center stage for a bruising political fight with millions of Americans caught in the middle. And here with us now is Chris Doles. He was a federal employee for 8 years as a civil engineer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and now he is the co-executive director of the Federal Unionist Network and Advocacy Group that represents federal workers. Chris, great to have you here with us. So you were part of the federal government as a federal worker earlier this year at the start of the Trump administration. You were there as DOGE came in, took a hatchet to so many federal positions. What's going through your mind right now as we are just kind of settling into this shutdown with a looming threat of more firings?
Yeah. I mean, this administration has been shutting down the federal government piece by piece all year long. They clearly, and that clip shows it, see this as yet another opportunity to shut down more of the government, not temporarily, but permanently. And so the question to us as federal workers who have a gun to our head in this negotiation saying if Schumer and Jeffries don't cave, they're going to fire more of us, we have a choice to make. Do we take the hostage position and say anything to save us? Or do we recognize that we took an oath to the American people that we are here to serve their interests, and that if we need to suffer a few weeks of a shutdown to preserve the public interest that the federal government is supposed to uphold, you know what? We might have a little bit more free time on our hands to explain to the American people all the things that we do for them and all the ways that this administration has been gutting civil rights protections at HUD. We saw the whistleblowers last week who got fired. Climate research at NASA and the EPA. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and all the things that it does to protect consumers' interests. The NLRB and FLRA are basically defunct organizations. All of the ways in which the federal government protects or is supposed to protect the public and regular, hardworking people, this administration has shown all year long they're committed to shutting all those things down. A little temporary shutdown for a political fight, we're ready.
What are you hearing from your former colleagues? We're talking about some 750,000 workers. 750,000. That's a huge amount of the federal workforce, not all, but that's a lot of people, and they're going to be impacted. Their families are going to be hurt if they are not getting paid. What are they worried about?
We've been hurt all year long, and this is the negotiation tactics of a bully and a wannabe dictator. Let's be very clear. This isn't like, you know, some tough bargaining from a Trump who just wants to draw a hard line to get his position. This is a wannabe dictator, a wannabe strongman, a guy who has glorified every strong leader internationally who has trod over democratic rights of their people. We're looking at a playbook. They're hollowing out the expertise of the civil service. They're punishing dissent in every form that it takes. They're sidelining every independent agency. This is straight out of the playbook of dictators and authoritarians all over the world today and through history. We need Congress to reject the fear tactics, to refuse all bad deals, and to protect the services that the federal government is meant to provide. Because if Trump wins this shutdown, then the American people lose the government that is supposed to protect their interests potentially permanently. The stakes are much higher than the next few weeks.
It sounds like you are not buying the president's argument or the Republican Party's line that this shutdown's the Democrats' fault.
Well, obviously not. Who's been shutting down the government all year long? Whose political movement is founded upon Grover Norquist's words back in the 1990s, who said he doesn't want to kill the federal government. He just wants it to whittle down to the size that he can drown it in the bathtub. These are ideologues who serve nothing but the smallest number of billionaires who have all the wealth in our society, who want to repurpose the entire federal government in their interests and make it so that the hardworking people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck, who need the services of Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, the SNAP benefits, all the people who are most vulnerable in our society are the ones who stand to lose the most. And federal workers are ready for this fight, even if they're doing it with a gun to our head. But we're sick of it. They've been pushing us to it. And we're ready to fight Donald Trump because we're not going to let him take our country into this direction any further.
There are federal workers living paycheck to paycheck, right? So, the last government shutdown we mentioned lasted 34 days. That was the longest ever. That's a couple of paychecks. Do federal workers have anywhere to turn to for help?
Look, Congress at the last shutdown passed a bill afterwards saying that all federal workers will get paid retroactively. We'll see whether this administration respects any laws anymore and actually enforces that. But in the meantime, there are resources out there. The Federal Unionist Network, which is my organization, has a page for resources. There are credit unions and community organizations that will give zero-interest loans to people to help, especially in New York and Long Island. Here, you'll see on our website, federalunionists.net, for federal workers who need those resources to make it through the next few weeks. Those are out there. But the real call right now for federal workers, you got some free time because you're not asked to come to work because you're shut out because you're furloughed. It's to actually tell your story, to make it in front of every media camera you can, to organize with your coworkers, to make sure that the public understands the impacts. And the broader public has a role too. SavePublicServices.com is our website for anybody who wants to support federal workers right now. SavePublicServices.com. We need the support of the broader public. We need federal workers to get organized. We'll make it through the short-term shutdown. The question is whether or not we're going to get our government back and whether or not we're going to get, any type of respect for basic working people, or this whole government's for sale for the billionaires.
Chris Doles, I really appreciate you coming in. Thank you for offering your perspective and bringing so much passion to the conversation.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The government is now shut down for the first time since, the previous Trump administration. And if you listen to the Trump administration today, this is entirely and completely the Democrats' fault. They're running a PR campaign to convince everyone, incorrectly I'd say, that the Dems are solely to blame for this shutdown.
The reason your government is shut down at this very minute is because, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of congressional Republicans and even a few moderate Democrats supported opening the government, the Chuck Schumer AOC wing of the Democratic Party shut down the government.
Democrats in Congress have officially shut down the United States government. House Republicans passed a nonpartisan, clean piece of legislation to extend current government funding until November 21st. But nearly every single Democrat senator voted against this bill. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, and it's because the Democrats have put us into this position. If the Democrats did not vote to shut down the government, we would not be standing up here talking about layoffs today.
They've also plastered that same sentiment across a bunch of government websites in what looks like a violation of government ethics rules, although, God, those are long gone. They're really weird messages, by the way, if you happen to check them out. But here's what I would say about this argument. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about how this administration has conducted itself over the last 9 months. Donald Trump is governing like the dictator of America, right? He promised to be a dictator on day one, his words. He's compared himself to America's king, even to the Pope. The goal of the second term, quite clearly, and it's not hiding this, is to assert complete control over every aspect of the federal government. He wants to directly control who gets fired and hired across the entire government and even civil society, from Fed directors to talk show hosts. He wants to directly control who gets indicted, most recently with the ridiculous prosecution of James Comey. He says, right now, the position of the Trump administration and Donald Trump is that he, by himself, unilaterally, can raise taxes on the American people by $1 trillion entirely by executive fiat, just by being like, yeah, taxes up. He says he can rescind or reallocate any congressionally appropriated funds basically at any time entirely by executive fiat. Oh, there's a bill to spend stuff there? No, we're not going to do it. Okay, but think of all that. But now it's the Democrats who are in the driver's seat when it comes to shutting down the government. That is a pretty tough sell, especially considering Trump is using the shutdown to, drumroll, govern like a king. Just today, Russell Vought, the top Trump official responsible for implementing this kind of unitary executive agenda, right? All power flows from the president, announced that more than $8 billion in federal funding, again, appropriated funding, legally appropriated, exclusively for blue states, would be frozen or canceled. That includes transportation infrastructure spending here in New York, climate infrastructure spending in more than a dozen other states, including California, Washington, New Jersey, but only states that didn't vote for Donald Trump. Now, there's a lot still unclear about what specifically he's referring to, but presumably this is congressionally appropriated money. It's passed into law, right? And it's the money that's appropriated. But again, the Trump administration's clawing it back, citing DEI, like there's too much DEI in the tunnel they're building across the Hudson River and the Green New Scam. Russell Vought's also going to use a shutdown as an excuse to fire even more federal workers. But he's been doing that. They've been doing that in an extension of the reckless DOGE cuts this administration unilaterally enacted earlier this year. The president is excited to do what he calls bad things that are irreversible.
So the last person that wants to shut down is us. Now, with that being said, we can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. And you all know Russell Vought. He's become very popular recently because he can trim the budget to a level that you couldn't do any other way. We're doing well as a country, so the last thing we want to do is shut it down. But a lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things.
So a lot of good can come from the shutdown. It will hurt Democrats. It's Democrats that are shutting the government down. And speaking of DOGE, there's also the Trump-backed bailout of the administration's kooky far-right buddy in Argentina, this guy. The administration is just giving him a $20 billion bailout line to help his struggling, possibly approaching crisis economy because he did all these sort of right-wing reforms ahead of Argentina's upcoming election. They've even said it's like a bridge to get him over the election. Now, Democrats in Congress don't get a say in that. Just, again, $20 billion, whoop. All that being done without any outside input. But the Democrats are the ones responsible for shutting the federal government down. And I will say, it doesn't appear from the polling that people are really buying it. New polling indicates more Americans are blaming the Republicans for the shutdown than the Democrats. And I think it's because it is obvious to anyone paying attention that Trump is running the show, right? As terrible that may be. He wants you to think that. He doesn't want to think the government's controlled by Democrats. Yesterday, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean confronted Speaker Mike Johnson in front of the cameras and said what a lot of people are thinking, that Donald Trump is unwell.
The president is unhinged. He is unwell. What are you doing?
A lot of folks on your side are too. I don't control.
Oh my God, please. That performance in front of the generals, that
I didn't see it.
is so dangerous. You know I serve on Foreign Affairs and Appropriations. This is a collision of those two things. Our allies are looking elsewhere. Our enemies are laughing.
I just left
you
the
have a
speaker's,
president who is who is unwell.
Claire McCaskill is former Democratic senator in Missouri. Brendan Buck worked in communications for House Speaker John Boehner, Paul Ryan. They both have experiences with government shutdowns, and they joined me now. Claire, what do you think about where we are, the sort of spin today about who gets blamed for it?
Well, listen, the Democrats have a lot of work to do here. The message is not complicated. They won't negotiate to save your health care. And by the way, there's two things that are different about this shutdown that have never occurred before in a shutdown. The first one is that the folks in charge of government will not negotiate. That never happened before. That never happened before. There was always negotiation going on. And by the way, at a minimum, they would show up at least to negotiate. I mean, Johnson doesn't even want them in the Capitol because he's afraid, frankly, probably of the Epstein vote. And then the second thing that's different here is never before have tax dollars been used to politicize a shutdown. You can go on every website and you can see the language is being used that is a blatant violation of the Hatch Act. Rhetoric being used with tax dollars on government websites. I mean, this has never, ever happened before under a Republican president or a Democratic president. So this is a much different kind of shutdown. And by the way, I have a friend who told me that her sister, who's a member of a Coast Guard family, Coast Guard families were in food lines today, knowing they won't get paid in October. ICE will get paid because they got all that money in the big ugly bill, but the Coast Guard won't get paid. So he's demonizing federal workers, many of whom are sacrificing greatly to serve their country. And I just pray the Democrats get aggressive and stay on message. This is about health care versus tax cuts for billionaires. If they do that, the government will begin to shut down. It will impact the economy. And I do think the Republicans will have to negotiate.